Welcome to Story Night, the City of Boise's cultural ambassador, where you hear true stories on a perceptive theme, recorded live in Boise, Idaho. I'm Artistic Director Jodi Eichelberger. In this podcast, curated storytellers are intermixed with a spontaneous community story slam. Today's featured stories are from Karen Cuellar, Steve Bunk, and Alice Thompson. This season our themes are based on the pieces from a chess game, and now it's time to move to the side with BiSHOP. Welcome to Story Night. I am your host and artistic director, Jodi Eichelberger. It is my pleasure to be with you. Oh, and there we have the lights. Excellent. We're going to do this for real. Okay. We are very grateful to the city of Boise, who chose Story Night to be the cultural ambassador just about a year and a half ago. The mayor of Boise appointed us, chose us to help tell the stories of everyday Boiseans and really bring out the fact that there's the diversity and individuality of the people who live in Boise and making it a city for everyone. So it is our privilege to do that through storytelling. We also want to thank our season sponsor, Keenly, and tonight's show sponsor is our volunteer board of directors. Can we actually have our current board members, you just want to put your hand up in the air and wave at everybody? Okay, there we go, 1, 2, 3. Back there, working tech, excellent. And then we also have some past board members here tonight. If you've ever served on the board of Story, you want to wave your hand too. Let's see. Oh, 2 over there, 2 over here, 1 way back there. Yes. All right, excellent. Thank you for being here. Now we're gonna. It's our 15th birthday show, everybody. And we want to also thank Jump for providing cupcakes in celebration. I think Maggie, we don't know where Maggie is. Maggie, are you in the house? No, okay. Well, if she comes later, maybe we'll have her say hi. All right. And so we're doing this. Oh. Anonymous, thank you so much. So the way this works is you use your little handheld computer, and there's an app in there that's called texting. And you open that, and then in the 2, you write 44321, and the message you write is Story B-Day. Story B-Day to 44321. Now, the other option is if you don't like that one and you want to become a Story subscriber, where are my Story subscribers? Look at them. So that is monthly support, and you can do same person, 44321, but then do Story sub instead, and that takes you into a different thing where we can do some automatic ticketing for you. It's springtime. We're all coming out of our couch mode, watching the movies. We're getting out and walking in the sunshine and smelling the lilacs. So we're going to exercise our legs a little bit right now, if you don't mind, those of you who are able. Okay, this first one's a little bit of a trick question. If you have attended Story Night at Jump, please stand as you are able. Let me repeat that. If you have attended Story Night at Jump, where we are right now, please stand as you are able. All right. There we go. I think people are getting it now. Yes, we are at Jump right now. And if you did not know it, you are also at Story Night. All right, very good. All right, we're going to dig into the history of our audience a bit. So, if you attended... Nope, stay standing. Now, see, I thought I was going to have to tell people to sit down, so I wrote it the other way around. So here's how it goes. If you attended Story Night at our previous venue, El Cora Shrine, please remain standing. Oh. Hey, look at these Shriners. Wow, it's harder to recognize them when they don't have their fezzes on. Okay. Now you guys can sit. But you might be standing up again in a moment. If you attended Story Night at the venue before that, the Rose Room, please stand. These guys are confident over here. They're like, we are going to be standing the whole time. All right. This is the Rose Room, which doesn't exist anymore. We were there for 2 seasons. All right. If you attended Story Night at our first venue, the Linen Building, please stand. Very good. All right. So the Linen Building was like 2010, 11, 12. So that's 15 years ago. Yeah. Thank you for all those years you've been with us. That's great. What? You only went once? Oh, okay. All right, here's one more. If you are attending Story Night for the first time tonight, would you stand? This is the future of Story. Very good. Welcome. Thank you for being here. So here's how the show works. We are, as far as I know, there's a lot of storytelling companies across America, but as far as I know, we're the only ones that do this crazy thing, is that we intermix curated storytellers with a community story slam. And now the slammers are you guys, all you in the audience. Some of you may have come with a story in mind. Some of you, I don't know why exactly, have no idea what story you're going to share, and you still go over and put your name in the bucket over there. Now we have a couple of rules for that. It should be your story, so your name matches your face as you put it in the bucket, okay? And those are 5-minute stories. Tonight's theme is BiSHOP. So some connection to BiSHOP, although we do tend to take very wide interpretations of the theme. So, as you will hear. How are we doing? Oh, anonymous again. Very good. Maybe our app isn't letting people put in their names. Well, there's a name. Carolyn, thank you. All right. So this is also something that's a little different about Story Night that I have to explain to a lot of our storytellers, is that we are not TEDx. The difference I feel is when you do TEDx, you are imparting knowledge upon people. This is the knowledge I have gained that I'm willing to waft on the wind in your direction for you to inhale and absorb and enrich your own life and live on and prosper with my wisdom. That's not us. And this makes it easier to be a slammer because the pressure is off, because you don't have to tell us how to interpret your story. You don't have to have a big moral at the end. You don't even have to have a lesson or something. It could be a story about the time that you bought a lottery ticket and lost, and that could be it. And then we'll know what the lesson is, but maybe you don't. It's okay. Now, that's only half of it. The other half is hearing the story, and I'd like to challenge all of you that are listening to stories tonight to do that with curiosity. And maybe here's a special thing. Also be aware of what lenses you use when you're receiving a story. And it's fine to have a certain lens. We all have our own viewpoint. But maybe pay attention tonight at what lenses you use that might actually be biases. And then you can go confess that to a priest later. Because tonight our theme is BiSHOP. Yeah. All this season we've been telling stories inspired by pieces on the chessboard. I guess I saved BiSHOP for this month because of Easter. Those of us who have set themes for Story have noticed often that when we do that, there's something kind of bizarrely related to our theme that seems to happen in the world. Now, I don't know a lot about popes or bishops, but I know that the Pope is the Bishop of Rome. And now here we have BiSHOP, but I'm not aware of any major event that has taken a place in that community this month. So maybe it didn't happen this time. But while studying in London, a friend of mine and I did go to a service at the Church of England that was all in Latin. This is not common in the Church of England, but we thought it would be cool. And we could walk there from our flat, and there was kind of a bishop and an acolyte who were doing the service, and that is all there was. It was them, the two of them, and the two of us. Now, the priest or bishop or whatever his title was, had this look on his face as we came into the cathedral that just kind of expressed, I'll say, Jesus Christ, but not in a prayerful way. There were these two college kids, clearly didn't know anything about Mass, and he wanted it to be done in 15 minutes, and we were just going to slow it down. So we went to a side chapel, the priest, the acolyte, my friend and I. They gave us Roman missals so that we could follow along. Now, I'm a choir kid, and I've done Kyrie eleison. I was ready to Kyrie with the best of them. But this priest was so rapid fire that we kept getting lost in our missal. And we're trying to do the responses, and then I'm like, I don't know where he is. And the acolyte is updating it. He passes it to my friend. My friend flips over and passes it to me. And then I pass my pages that are lost to the acolyte, and we just keep going around and around and around until we made it through the service, which was quite short. It did not take long. It was kind of this assembly line with the updated pages. At least 3 of the 4 of us were exhausted by the time we reached the closing phrase, ita missa est, which I guess is how most of these Latin masses end, which roughly translated means 15 minutes for 15 years.
15 seconds.
Oh, yeah.
10 years is our longest standing volunteer. Kelly Sassos has been with us since the Shriners as an usher and story booth attendant. We have an average of about 22 active volunteers. After talking to the crew at the front, they've dubbed it the Friendship Incubator, a community of audience members, storytellers passionate enough to step up. Natalia's been here for 4. Catherine for 9, Kelly for 10, Cynthia for 6, and Heather for over a year. Incredibly dedicated volunteers.
I think Hannah was relieved it wasn't 15 minutes. I think you are also relieved that it wasn't. Oh, yeah, we got some more names. I challenge you to give a $5 is an interesting name. Good. That was Hannah May. And I just looked at a photo album from this show in 2017, the April show, which was our first birthday show at Jump. And 2 people were in that photo. It was myself and Hannah May. For some reason, Hannah May looks younger today than she did then. And I have lost all the color out of my hair. Doesn't seem fair. But so Hannah May's been with us a very long time. And you'll hear more from her later in the show. All right, let's go ahead and take that screen up as we move into the more meditative parts of the show. This is not an example of that. Despite my inexperience with bishops, that somehow doesn't sound right, but... It actually appears I am uniquely qualified to host the Bishop Show because I took a BuzzFeed quiz to find out which chess piece I am, and the result was Bishop. Yeah. Now, I have no idea how selecting spaghetti as my favorite food, a dream vacation in Greece, and not playing video games led to Bishop, but that is the wise evaluation of the BuzzFeed algorithm. And here's what it says being a bishop reveals about my personality. People either love you or hate you. You can be a little aggressive at times, but that makes you you. But you march to the beat of your own drum and never take no for an answer. As an example of that, I'd like to bring up a guest tonight who tried to tell me she was not going to have anything to share for tonight's show, and I said no. So, here she is, a person who is uniquely qualified to speak about bishops because she is the executive director of the Bishop's House. Please welcome Amelia Berg. Thank you, Amelia, for coming. And she's out in the lobby with some information about Bishop's House. If you didn't see her before the show, you can check that information out at intermission. Thanks for coming tonight, Amelia. Tell us a little bit about your bishop world.
Sure. So I'm standing up for a couple of reasons. One, I'm going to tell you a story, and two, because it's the first time I've been here. I stood up in the back. You guys didn't see me. So, kindness, please. So I'm the director at the Bishop's House. We are a historic home. Our mission as a nonprofit is preservation and restoration, and that's what we do. We were built in 1889. We were first in Idaho, so we lived first, and we were the home to the 6 Episcopal bishops of Idaho. Bishops and their families lived there into the 60s, and then we became nurses, home, the first senior center, kind of random things that they used the house for. And then they decided that St. Luke's needed a parking garage, so the house was going to go, and instead a group of people from the Episcopal Church got together and worked with the Historical Society here in Idaho, and were able to save the house. And the house was moved, right? Thank you, right? So the house was moved 50 years ago, up Warm Springs, all the way up to the little space right behind the old penitentiary, right between the warden's house and the guard's house. So we were never there when the penitentiary was open, but that's where we live now. And I think that's everything I had to say, but now I get to tell you a story. So the cool thing about our house is that it is heated by geothermal water. You might know this. It's an awesome thing about Boise and a pretty awesome thing about Idaho that we heat a lot of things with geothermal water, which saves the planet and makes us all very happy. Our house was always heated by geothermal water. So when they brought it up to behind the old pen, they hooked it right up, but we're first on the line. So the water that feeds our home, that heats our home, under the planet, travels all the way through our city. It travels under roads. It travels under the sidewalks of Boise State University. It travels all the way up and back down through the Capitol building. And it travels under the roads and all the way under the houses out to Edwards Greenhouse. The connection to water is the biggest thing that connects me to the Bishop's House. I had a connection with the water long before I had a connection to the Bishop's House. When I was 4 years old, I was sitting under my grandfather's cherry tree up off of Hill Road, and I realized that I was not the center of the universe. For the first time, I realized. I know, it breaks your heart. I was sitting and just enjoying being 4 years old when a man came by, and he had just lost the on the wheel hubcap. Thank you. He had just lost the hubcap on his vehicle. And he was positive that it had rolled down next to me. And so he said, "Have you seen this hubcap?" I had not seen it. It was a total stranger I was talking to, so I definitely hadn't seen anything and had not much to say. But he insisted that we start rolling things down the driveway so we could see where they landed and we could see if maybe the hubcap was somewhere around there. Never found it, but let me say, this moment was an unknown unknown for me, by a total unknown. and I realized there is a whole universe that I do not know about. This was right after my kindergarten teacher came and spoke to me at my home. You know, they used to come and check out what you were doing. Can you cut a circle? Can you use scissors and not hurt yourself? That kind of thing. Right after that, and then right before my mother took me on our first walk down to the school so that I could walk all by myself, kindergartner, we walked down the dirt road. We crossed over all the runoff, the hot water runoff from Edward's greenhouse. And then we got a little bit farther down and turned to Cuellar Elementary. And I was so grown up and no longer the center of the universe. So a lot of things were going to happen. Guys, I get nervous. People get nervous, right? I'm going to assume out of the whole room, people get nervous. So I was, in fact, also married in a little house, a Victorian home, also heated by the same hot water, just right around the corner from Cuellar Elementary as well. So all of these things come to mind when I'm at the house. When I'm at the bishop's house and I'm watching the steam rise off of the runoff, when I'm watching the little snakes in the water staying warm all year round, the frogs croaking all year round because of that hot water. When I'm watching those things and I'm bleeding the radiators in the house, blistering my fingers because of how hot it is. All of those things reminding me of what is known, what is yet to be known, what can be known. And that's what makes me love working at the bishop's house. That's it.
Thank you, Amelia. The Bishop's House is actually hosting a free storytelling workshop on August 28th. It's free, but registration is required, and you can find that on our website. But speaking of workshops, we're also facilitating a Refugee Speakers Bureau storytelling workshop at the Wasmuth Center on May 10th. For that one, you need to go to idahorefugees.org to sign up for it. And there, I want to invite another special guest to the stage, if I can briefly. You might have seen the very beautiful cupcakes in the entryway as you came in. If you didn't get a cupcake, be sure to get one at intermission. The person responsible for that cupcake, those cupcakes, and also largely responsible for us being at Jump all this time, since 2016, just came in. So I wonder, Maggie, would you want to come up and just say hi to everybody? This is Maggie Soderberg from Jump. I mean, can you believe 2016? That's 9 years ago. That was before Jump there was nothing outside.
I know. And no, Jodi, I don't want to come up and speak. Anyway, we were so fortunate to have Story Night come to us when we first opened about 15 years ago. And it's just been one of those things that really impacts our community. He brings people together. He tells stories. He makes all of us feel like we're not so alone in the world. And I just am so grateful to have Jodi and totally love him and want him to be here forever. Or at least for this week.
Gosh, who else can I invite up here to say nice things about me? I haven't had that hubcap moment that Amelia talked about, so I still think the universe revolves around me. Eventually that moment will come. So like in these workshops, our featured storytellers have some coaching from Story Night. They work with us in advance. They're a combination of self-submitted and recruited stories. And to me, this seems obvious, but the stories belong to the storytellers. So any story you hear tonight is their story. They have expressed to us that These are events from their lives that as they recall them, and we do not represent an endorsement from Story Story Night or reflect the views of opinions of Story Story Night. Disclaimer ends here. Okay. So now we've reached the exciting time in the show where we get to invite our featured storytellers up onto the stage, and I'm going to call them up in reverse order. So first we have returning to Story Story Night, although first time at the flagship stage, Alice Thompson. Welcome, Alice. Also a former board member. And we also have Steve Bunk tonight. Steve Bunk, here he comes. Oh, you're distributed all around here. But first up to the stage and coming directly to the mic, her first time at Story Story Night, please welcome Karen Cuellar. And those of you who are very sensitive to joining cults, hold on to your friends. All right. And it's Cuellar.
Okay. Oh, this is weird. Hello. So my story is about a time in my life about 26 years ago where my life became jujitsu, jujitsu, jujitsu. Or that's Jodi's decision of how that is my life. That's what he thought it sounded like. But I have to tell you a little bit of how I got there. So I met my first husband. Don't judge. I only have had two. In University of Illinois in Urbana-Champaign. He was an engineer working on his master's. I was a senior in the same department. He's a good-looking guy, extremely smart, lots of friends that were kind of an odd bunch. I figured out later they were all from this jiu-jitsu club. They all had really bad haircuts. And the reason for that is that was their weekend entertainment, is trading off who was going to give who a haircut this weekend. So anyway, but this was something my first husband was extremely passionate about. Bob loved this particular type of jiu-jitsu. So after doing it for 6 years in Urbana-Champaign, when we moved to LA together, he looked for a club there that did this particular style of jiu-jitsu and never found one. So I tried to encourage him to try other ones, but he never did. So he got obsessed with other things. But at least once a week, he would still practice jiu-jitsu in a local park near where we lived in Redondo Beach. Well, what that looks like when you're talking about a single man practicing jiu-jitsu by himself, picture him in a little bike uniform, little tight pants, little tight shirt, and he's repeatedly throwing himself on the ground in the grass with occasional roll. So he got a lot of funny looks out of the kids, especially when he tried to steal the monkey bars from them. But anyway, so he would continue to practice jiu-jitsu in LA. We lived there for 5 years. But then we moved to Boise. First thing he did, first month, jiu-jitsu clubs. Check them out. What style do you do? What are you all about? Lo and behold, we find a jiu-jitsu club here in Boise that does the exact style of jiu-jitsu that he was so passionate about and had done in Champaign, Illinois. Then we found out also how rare it was. Turns out this particular style, the people that did it, there are a number of clubs in Northern California. There's one in Chicago, there's one in Champaign, there's one in Boise, Idaho. So what are the odds, right? So that is when Sensei Lee became a really big part of our life. Sensei Lee was an ambitious young man. He had bought a North End property, a really nice house that was coded such that he could run a business out of it. His entire downstairs was turned into a dojo to the point where literally he was sleeping in a closet in a twin bed. That's all he had left. His life was his day job and then jiu-jitsu. The schedule was quite intense. Monday through Friday, my husband Bob worked at HP. He would go directly to jiu-jitsu right after work from Monday through Thursday, and he'd stay there till about 9:30, so I wouldn't see him till 9:30. Then every Saturday afternoon was jiu-jitsu. Then the senior class members, or the more advanced techniques, were taught on Sundays once or twice a month in the mornings on Sunday. And that was Sensei Lee, Bob, and these two brothers, for the most part. It was these 4 senior students that would practice this on the Sundays. Now, Lee became a really big part of my life as well. In his free time, he and I became quite close. He was a real conflicted young man. He was from the Mormon faith, but he'd been kicked out. His family had rejected him. Had grown up in Twin Falls, and he was the youngest son, and he was a gay man. But he was not out at work. He was not even letting himself date. He desperately wanted to get married and have a family and not be a homosexual. I mean, it was a really, really sad. But we became very close, and we talked a lot about his issues and my issues and everything. Well, in 1998, I had a baby. And I have to be honest, it has nothing to do with jiu-jitsu, but the problems, not the baby, but I did, we managed it on Friday or Saturday night, anyway. But we did start to have problems in our marriage, became more obvious after we had a kid. And the jiu-jitsu schedule was such that he was really only seeing the baby Friday and Saturday night and Sundays, and that was kind of it. So over the course of the first year or so, after I was off work, we were having some issues. And Lee did continue to be, so this jiu-jitsu schedule was quite intense. Well, one of the other ambitions that Lee had is he wanted to have the annual jiu-jitsu conference in Boise. So after many years of petitioning, because it was always in Northern California, many years of petitioning, in the year 2000, he was going to have the jiu-jitsu conference for this particular type of jiu-jitsu in Boise. So since I was off work, this also meant I was running the tickets and the reservations, and I was doing all the reservations, and anyway, I was doing all the marketing work and all that stuff for this conference. So more jiu-jitsu. And then on top of that, right then, Lee had saved enough money to remodel his upstairs attic and make an actual apartment, so he had more than just a bed to sleep in a closet. So Lee had temporarily actually moved in with us, and so he was living with us in a guest bedroom across from the baby during this time in my life. So the conference comes up in March of 2000. It's an all-day Friday and all-day Saturday event. It goes off without a hitch, extremely successful. The ceremony on Saturday night, everybody said it was a great success. Big dinner, big ceremony, everybody loved it. But what I forgot to tell you is we had talked to Lee, Bob and I, about our issues in our marriage, and we had decided that we were going to take 2 weeks off from jiu-jitsu. Bob was going to take a week off from work and go on a vacation, but first we were going to spend a week, and he was not going to do jiu-jitsu, and he was just going to spend time with our kid. And this is right where we decided shortly after that to go into counseling, and then a year and a half later we divorced. But anyway, after the conference, we had decided he has to take 2 weeks off of jiu-jitsu because we just weren't spending any time together. So, and Lee knew this. Like I said, he's living with us, he's a good friend of mine, and he understood what was going on in our marriage and understood this situation. So after this conference goes off, Saturday night, everything goes great. Sunday morning, Bob and I are at home, and Bob gets a text. Mandatory advanced training class, be at the dojo 11 a.m., mandatory, exclamation point. Literally, we didn't even know the guy was out of the basement. We thought he was still in the bedroom. And Bob's like, well, that's weird. He knows we're taking 2 weeks off. We've discussed this with him for months. And just texts him back, no, I won't be there. And doesn't think anything more of it. But then we receive a call. And this is the hard part of the story, sorry. We get a call from one of the brothers. Matt says, Pete was stabbed. Lee stabbed Pete. Sensei Lee has stabbed one of the brothers. This has resulted in, This has resulted in a big tumble. Everybody's injured in the dojo. It ends up stumbling out onto the sidewalk out front. Lee has run off in his car. The brothers are really nervous because apparently Lee was yelling that Bob wasn't there, and he was extremely upset that Bob didn't show up and he messed everything up. And in addition, they knew, we were close to them as well, that Lee was staying with us. So this man has just done this awful thing out of nowhere. So Bob and I had to think very quickly about what to do. He has keys to our house, he's living with us. This thing has happened. So we decided, okay, I don't think he's gonna hurt me, but he can't come in this house again, he can't go anywhere near you, because obviously he had bad plans for you as well. So Bob had to stay in the house with the baby, and I went outside by the front driveway. And Bob very quickly packed up Lee's clothes in his bedroom and toiletries and such and kind of snuck it outside, and then we just waited. And I still remember what my ex-husband and my baby looked like in the window while I'm just waiting. And eventually, Lee's Jetta goes down the street, but then goes by, and then he drives by again, but doesn't stop, and then he pulls in the driveway. And when he got out of the car, the plan kind of just fell apart because his whole face is bashed in and he's just a bloody mess. So there wasn't me demanding keys out of him. The first thing I said was, okay, we need to get you to the hospital. So I got him into the passenger seat and I took him to the hospital. I took him to St. Luke's, and he explained at St. Luke's to me that his plan had been that he was going to stab Bob because I would be, quote, better off. And then the two brothers would then kill him because this was his idea. He called it his version of suicide by cop. And so that was his plan. And in addition to that, he had taken gasoline and he had poured it all around the dojo. So he said, in the event that they don't quite kill me, but they just injure me, then I was just gonna light a match and then I could just be burned up in the dojo. So that was his suicide plan. So he was severely injured. He broke his orbital bone, multiple ribs, all sorts of stuff. I tried to convince him to go into Intermountain for mental health care. He didn't. We tried to talk the brothers into pressing charges. They wouldn't. They just refused to, they just said they never wanted to see him again. They were just really upset. So the following week, we had a picnic at the brothers' house, and we told all the students what had happened with Lee, and that jiu-jitsu was over for more than 2 months. This was over, period. And what we found out there was a whole bunch of stories that were quite crazy. A number of the students for months were like, oh yeah, Lee did this thing where he twisted my arm and instead of tapping out, he really hurt me, you know. For months, apparently, Bob had a rubber knife, and that was used in advanced techniques for a knife skills training, to defensive knife skills. Well, apparently for months, in these Sunday advanced classes, he talked the boys into just using a regular old knife. So that's why that Sunday a knife had been used, and he had stabbed Pete with it, and had intended to stab Bob with it. So all these things, 20/20 hindsight being what it was, it was really obvious this man was falling apart and that something was going wrong, but I had missed it, and they hadn't caught it. And so really the lesson I learned, Bob has since gone on to do Tai Chi, Aikido, and karate, but that's his new wife's problem. But it, and he did, when we went to counseling, we did come up with a phrase that was quite interesting. And that was, the counselor did say, perhaps were you cult ready? Meaning, did you let yourself, get in this cult kind of situation? Were you a little bit too, and he agreed. And there have been situations since then where his daughters had to tell him, Dad, stop giving him so much money, or whatever. But anyway, I think the lesson here really is, because I do actually really have a lot of admiration for the skills he learned in these martial arts. But I do believe that the title of sensei, much like the title of bishop in the Mormon church that really injured this man, can sometimes give power to someone, and as a student you may offer them your power that maybe you should have some caution about that. That's all. This is a cautionary tip. Anyway, that's all.
Thank you, Karen. And I do want to say, if you or someone you know is struggling with a mental health crisis, there is the hotline. 988 is the number for that. And if you don't know what jiu-jitsu is, oh, you spell it out. I thought you had a different sign. There it is. I was like, I feel like the sign for jiu-jitsu tells you kind of what it is. Yeah. And earlier, when Karen described her ex-husband in the park doing jiu-jitsu by himself, and then he would fall to the ground and roll around, I did think I had a better understanding of how jiu-jitsu and the baby were connected. I just didn't understand what roll around meant when there was somebody else involved. All right, we are going to have a slammer now, so if our slammer booth will bring us tonight's receptacle, which kind of looks like a bishop's hat, maybe? Sort of, I don't know. They're white, right? Aren't they? It's big. Thank you, Carolyn. All right, we have a couple of contenders here. Carolyn, former president of Story Night. All right. And our first story slammer, who is going to tell a 5-minute story related to Bishop for a family audience, is Frida. Oh.
Shannon. Good evening. I'm so excited. Okay, I grew up in Las Vegas. I was born and raised in Las Vegas, Nevada. True story. Okay? Not many people can say that. Not even anyone else in my family can say that. But I was. There's a lot of stories I could share about Las Vegas, but here's the one I'm going to go with tonight, okay? I really didn't know any different growing up in Las Vegas. Be walking to school, and all of a sudden you'd hear, pooh, pooh, pooh. And I'm like, oh, it's just gunshots. It's fine. Keep walking to school. Let's go. Throughout my childhood, I had lots of experiences that are now questionable as an adult. And I'm like, what happened? And why did you think that that was okay? When I was in 7th grade, my family moved from inner city Las Vegas up to a more middle upper class area. And we lived in a new house. That was brand new, exciting experience. And I changed schools, and then I had to make new friends. And then the next year, I changed schools and had to make new friends. And then the next year, I started high school, and I changed schools, and I had to make new friends. It gets better. My first year of high school was fantastic. 9th grade was amazing. I had friends that I made, some from before, some new friends. I was on the volleyball team. I was on the swimming team. I held the state record for swimming for a lot of years. I was on the springboard diving team, which was a thing. I still like springboard diving, and my body tells me that I am no longer 15. Just a little bit of a reminder. Ninth grade was a good year. There was a lot going on. I had friends, I had my first boyfriend, I had sports, and I was pretty okay at school. 10th grade, everything kind of changed. I broke up with my boyfriend. I did not like my team for some of the sports, and school got really hard. I was like, well, actually, maybe I'm kind of not smart, and I need to think about a different plan. So I decided school is not for me. Some school is for some people, and school is not for other people. So I decided that I would change course, just like the bishop takes a pivot to the side. You see what I did there? Okay. I decided that I would voluntarily change schools and pursue a cosmetology program. In Las Vegas, they have a vocational school, and you can take a vocation because academics is one direction, and if you take the bishop's course, this direction, then you can do a vocational school. So I changed schools again in 11th grade, okay? Same school, high school, 2 years, solid. Changed schools, 11th grade. Now, I will tell you, this was not one of my finer choices because everybody at the new school had already been friends with each other for 2 years. So now I am the outsider coming into a new school to a cosmetology vocational program, and I'm just trying to find my footing, find my way. On top of that, we had to wear uniforms, white scrubs in high school, in a cosmetology lab where you're surrounded with 100 teenage girls. What could go wrong? Nothing, right? 100 teenage girls, cosmetology lab, 9 hours a day. I will tell you, I experienced new levels of drama and gossip and chaos to degrees that I had never, ever experienced. And I will tell you, I hated it. It was the worst. I remember walking down the hallway, slower each day, trying to convince myself to make it to the lab. And the cosmetology wing was at the end of the school, right next to the automotive wing. And everything else in the school was on the other side. We were the outcasts on this side. And I was like, I hate this so much. And I started looking around the cosmetology lab day in and day out, realized everything in here is flammable. The automotive department is right next door. Everything in the automotive department is flammable. We are the two wings on one side of the school. Thus hatched a very, very evil plan in my mind. And I decided that I was going to burn the school down, but really just the cosmetology wing because they're the ones I hated the most. Okay, I could block off the hallway and just make sure that the fire was kept to the flammable part. All right, we're going to get to the end. I'm going to burn it down fast. Okay, I made the great decision to go tell my high school counselor that here was my plan. And I told him, look, I hate this place, and I've decided that I'm going to burn this place down. And he said, what if, instead of burning the school down, you could graduate early? And I said, say more things like that. Needless to say, I did not burn the school down, and I am here to tell the story.
Thank you, Frida. Hey, would you springboard yourself over to the slammer booth there and sign our release for Swim Club? Perfect. Wow, that counselor was worth whatever they were paid. They saved the school district a lot of money. Actually, I remember a story like this in your history here. Your drums, right, are stored at the temple in Ontario, Oregon, and Frida set it on fire. Yeah. Oh, okay. That's unconfirmed. Okay. And you had a fundraiser and were able to get your drums replaced. So we're grateful that you got that back so we can have you in here tonight. 15 seconds, 15 years.
Okay, 63% of our audience are return audience members. 63% of you keep coming back. That means you're diehard fans. We have an honorary shout out for Jim, Chandler, and Frank. We don't know your last name. Who are our number one attending audience members. Thank you, Jim, Chandler, and Frank. Okay.
Okay, thank you. And we are going to move to our next featured storyteller. First time sharing a story at Story Night. Please welcome Steve Bunk.
At those rare moments when I've had to make a big decision that was going to change my life, I sometimes considered an old idea that the most rewarding choice, maybe even the most strengthening one, would also, as a rule of thumb, be the hardest path to take. When I think about making those choices, I would consider whether it should be for my own personal development or maybe for the greater good. I mean, that's an old kind of long-running philosophical chess match. But for the purposes of my story tonight, I'm not going to deal with the philosophy. I'll just stick with the chess. I had a chessboard when I was growing up, but I never learned any of the strategy. I didn't know any of the openings or the middle game or the end game. All I knew was how the pieces moved around on the board. I knew, for example, that the bishop moves diagonally on the same color squares and can go back and forth. In those moments when I had to make those big decisions about life, I'd sometimes think about whether I should move forward quickly, like the rook does, or whether I should go on a more tangential path. And generally, I think I chose to go on a diagonal path. And I think there are reasons for that. One reason that I was interested in the diagonal is that I had a problem early on with authority figures, particularly an overbearing parent, who was always, you go right, you go straight, I want you to go right there. Yeah. Well, I think I'll go that way. Another reason that I actually like better as an explanation for my attraction to the diagonal is that it has to do with the old saw that the journey is more important than the destination. And I've always been interested in the journey. The journey has been alluring for me, and the side paths have been, irresistible. I don't think I ever would have come to Idaho if it weren't for this interest in the side path. I would have stayed in California, where I started writing for the local weekly newspaper when I was 15. And I've been writing professionally ever since then. That's just to say, for money. And the path for a writer, straightforward, was then and is now, to get a master's degree in creative writing, because that opens a lot of doors to the professional ecosphere. But I decided after college that I was going to become a freelance magazine writer, which is a hard road to go on. I think I wanted to do that for a couple of reasons. One, well, there are reasons that I mentioned. One is that I had trouble with authority figures, and I didn't want anybody telling me what to do. And the other is that I could travel around as much as I wanted. So after college, I lit out for the Oregon coast, and I lived there for about a year, and I met a guy from Idaho, and I told him I was thinking about moving to the mountains, and he said, "You should move to McCall." So I moved there. That was in 1973, so that was 52 years ago. And I added it up recently, and I spent about half that time in Idaho, and the rest of it mostly overseas. Just keep coming back and forth. On one of the times back, I decided to apply for a job at a multinational company here in Boise. That was not a straightforward move for me, because I knew that I was psychologically not suited to work in a big company. The company in question was Morrison Knudsen, which has since been swallowed up by the Washington Group. But back then, when I was about 30 years old, it was the largest heavy construction and engineering company in the world. And it had the big offices over there on Broadway near Park Center, across from Julie Davis Park. And the job was was called Senior Writer in Marketing Communications. So by then I'd been a writer for some time, and the idea of writing about brochures and writing speeches struck me as kind of a step backward. But the money was a step forward. So on balance, it's diagonal. And I went through a long interview process, and then when they offered me the job, called me up, I kind of danced around the living room. I was so happy to get this job. But at the same time, I loathed the idea of going there and doing the work. So the reason I took the job under those circumstances was because I had an ulterior motive. I had a secret plan. And on the first day, I brought this giant map of the world to the office, and I put it on the wall. And my boss looked kind of askance at it, but he didn't say anything. It was part of my secret plan, which was to work there for 12 months and save up enough money to move to Australia. And I knew these 12 months were going to be hard on me psychologically, so I figured, whenever it got tough, I could put my finger on the dot of Boise, and I could draw this long diagonal line down through the Pacific Ocean to Sydney, and I'd feel better because I'd remember my goal. And I was right, it was tough from the first day. My initial job was to write a brochure for the railroad division. And there was another writer in the department. He brought me over to his filing cabinet, and he opened the drawer and he said, "All of these manuscripts are texts that I've written over the past 15 months for this brochure, and they've all been rejected." And I said, "Wow, why?" And he said, "Well, brochures in this company are kind of like a political football. It's a chance for everybody to reject something and exercise a little power without any major financial repercussions. It shows them they have some clout." I said, "Oh, great. So that means whatever I write is going to get rejected." And he said, well, you got any suggestions, any ideas? He said, well, he pulled out one of the manuscripts. He said, this is the first text I wrote 15 months ago. I think it's the best one. Nobody will remember it. And I looked at it and I said, okay. So I submitted it, which, yeah, says something about my attitude, I guess. And there was a meeting eventually, and the vice president of the railroad division was there, and everybody on this side of the table went one by one and said what they didn't like about the brochure. And it got to the vice president, and he said, I like it. And then everybody on that side said how much they liked it. And then the other writer and I looked at each other and thought, we may be onto something here, It went up the other side, the first side, and everybody, of course, that was a naysayer, all became yay-sayers, and it was unanimous. Everybody liked the brochure, and it got published, and nobody remembered it was the original text. So 12 months went by eventually, and I told the boss, I'm quitting. And he said, what? You just got here. Where are you going? And I said, well, I'm going to move to Australia. And he said, Australia? Hang on. Let me talk to the vice president. I'll be back in just a second. Okay. So he went away and came back shortly, and he said, company policy, we can't give you any more money. We can give you the money, the raise at the end of the year and a little bonus, and that's it. But I got something else for you. You know those two big meetings we have semi-annually on either coast, where all the brass come from all over the world? Well, you're not senior enough to go to that, but I've arranged for you to attend. You can rub shoulders with all the brass. What do you think of that? I was kind of speechless, actually. I said, well, that's nice of you, thank you, but I'm going to stick to my plan. I'm moving to Australia. And he said, wait a second. Let me talk to the VP one more time. I'll be right back. All right. So he was a little longer this time. He came back and he said, do you know how many technical writers we have around the city? I said, technical writers? No, I have no idea. How many? He said, 17. I said, okay. He said, I'm going to put you in charge of all of them. You're going to have 17 people. What do you think of that? What I thought was, okay, so I got 17 people that I'm going to have all their problems and their issues and their hassles and their doubts and their fears. And I'm going to deal with it. And there's no extra money. And this is my inducement for staying. Well, of course, from his point of view, and if you're the kind of person who goes straight for the goal, which in this case would be a great big office eventually with a big view and a big desk of 100% mahogany and, a silver coffee set and a private secretary. What you need to do is get a fiefdom. You need some people. So he was offering me something, of value, and I realized that. So I said, thanks very much. That's a nice offer, but I'm going to go to Australia. I'm stuck on the plan. And he said, I knew I never should have let you put that map of the world on the wall. Well, I did. I moved to Australia, and I stayed there for 15 years. And I traveled all around the country, lived all around, and traveled through Southeast Asia, and traveled into the Indian subcontinent and the Far East, and wrote for lots of magazines and newspapers. I wrote a few books. So I actually accomplished my goal of becoming a freelance writer, albeit in a very diagonal manner, all the way down under. At the end, I met somebody. We got married and came to to America, sorry. And I left behind all of the connections that I'd made and the credibility I had built up there. And I came back to where the few people I had known in my younger years had all moved on with their lives. And we didn't even move back to Idaho originally. We were in other states for about 6 years. And when we finally came back to Boise, we had an infant child, and I fell right into the absorption of parenthood. And, some time went by, and I eventually started working as the editor of Idaho Magazine, which I'm still doing. And I stopped writing much because I was mostly editing. I didn't travel much because I was parenting. And then along the way, unfortunately, I got divorced. And then our child, as they do, grew up. And then the pandemic came. So I started working remotely. And then I started going to other countries to work on the magazine. And I'd come back to Boise, and I'd go to another country, and I'd come back. And I've been doing that for years. And I also started writing again. And in fact, I have a novel out just the other week. It came out from an independent Idaho publisher. It's a murder mystery. It's called Paint It Noir. It's set in McCall, where I first moved more than a half a century ago. And it actually has a chess scene in it too, with two bishops facing off against each other. I think about all those pieces on the board, and I sometimes wonder, did I choose the piece or did it choose me? Was I always fated to be what I started out to be, or is it possible to transform to, like the pawn on the board, just sort of move forward, maybe miraculously manage to avoid all the pitfalls and get to the other side of the board and transform into the most powerful piece on the board, the queen that can go wherever she wants. Maybe it's a matter of just making the right moves at the crucial moments, or maybe there really never is any choice. I don't know, it's a tough question. I don't have the answers. I only know the moves. I don't really know chess at all. Thank you.
Steve, does your murder mystery happen to feature a sensei in jiu-jitsu? Tonight, Steve's publisher has provided some special bookmarks for all of you. You can find in the lobby. You can get that during intermission or after the show. Steve's crime fiction is called Paint It Noir. It was published this month by the Idaho Indie Hidden Shelf Publishing House, and you can get it through the usual online outlets or through bookstores, and look for that bookmark. All right, we're going to revisit the screen here, I think, if our technology is still functioning. We are celebrating 15 years tonight, and this is just the beginning of the celebration, because coming up in June, so this is officially our 15th birthday show, but in June we're going to be doing a special 15th anniversary special. And then in July and August, we have Story Story Late Night returning. And here to tell you about it is our oldest and newest hosts, Jessica Holmes and Alicia Donahue. All right. It's looking good. Keep those... There we go. Oh, Anonymous is still active. Anonymous is still going there. Jasmine, thank you. All right, and here come the beautiful ladies.
Hello, I'm Alicia Donahue.
Hi, I'm Jessica Holmes.
We meet again. Well, you might not know, Jessica and I first met a dozen or so years ago on a comedy stage in a contest called Boise's Funniest Person. For people, thank you. For people who had never before done stand-up comedy, ever. And we tied for first.
Mm-hmm.
Until a tiebreaker when Jessica won. And now she comes first again! No! You'll be hosting June?
Yes, June 23rd.
June 23rd.
Yes.
And I will be hosting, I'm the host of the summer series in July and August this summer, and I'm so happy to be here. Thank you. No, thank you. Wow, terrific audience.
Right. At that contest, I had a joke prepared in case we had a standoff, but I decided my set would be too short, so I used it the first round. So I had nothing to say, so I ended up telling a story about bombing at a story night, where I told a story about this wilderness adventure I took, but for some reason, it devolved into poop talk. And you should see the audience when you start talking about that. You should see the light go out of their eyes.
And somehow she won.
I don't know how. But sometimes your bombs are your greatest wins.
It's true.
That's true.
What's the theme for June?
Yes, the theme for June 23rd is My Own Private Idaho, Stories of Wild States. It's a reprise of a theme that we had. So we are still looking for storytellers for that theme. If you have your own private Idaho story, I hope it doesn't involve poop in any way, because that does not work for half the crowd. Just, you can talk to us at intermission right over there.
We'll be sitting right over there. And then the theme for July is Hot Mess, Stories of Getting Sloppy. So we'll be out at the women's ward at the Idaho Penitentiary, where it's sure to be scorching.
Yes.
So bring me
It'll be
your
a hot
stories of getting sloppy for Hot Mess. We'll be sitting right over here during intermission.
Yes.
We'd love to hear your stories. And I look forward to seeing you this summer.
Yay. Thank you.
All right, we're going to take a short break. You can go get a bookmark, you can go get a cupcake, you can go to the Slammer booth and put your name in to tell a story. You can talk to Alicia and Jessica. You can text Story B-Day to 44321, and we'll see you back in just a few minutes. We are going to have a featured song here from our drummers. This next number is called Ame no Mibashira, which in honor of our BiSHOP theme roughly translates as Heavenly Pillar and refers to an episode in Japanese mythology. It was written, like all their songs, by Ikuyo Conant, artistic director of Watsonville Taiko in California. So here we have Ame no Mibashira. Sangha Taiko. A heavenly pillar. And boy, if someone had been sitting in that front row, they might have gone on their way to see heaven sooner than expected. Yeah, very good. All right, welcome back to BiSHOP. If you can take your seats. Thank you to Cynthia Richards and Marnie Ellis, another former board member. Thank you, Marnie, for doing our Story B-Day to 44321. And the lights are going to be coming down. I'll invite our storytellers to come back up to the stage. Okay. This is one of the most serious parts of the show. So I really need to get people's attention here because this is a message from our season sponsor. Now, we've had this sponsor all season, and they made a special request. Now, I had noticed they write their own message, and I had noticed that Taylor Swift was often featured somewhere. Like all Swifties or like Taylor says, or, I was like, this sponsor must kind of like Taylor Swift. Well, tonight I got this email from our sponsor. Since I am a Swiftie, I had to do at least one ad with a song. And when I saw that BiSHOP is part of the endgame of chess, I naturally started singing Endgame. It's not one of her best songs, but it has a good hook nonetheless. So, big request here. If you are cool with it, could you sing? I don't know if you can tell, but I am not a Taylor Swift fan. And I did not know this song. So, okay, here we go. I'm going to be cool with it. What does she do? What did she... I wanna be your end game. I wanna be your first string. I wanna be your A-team. I wanna be your end game, end game. Yes, Taylor, we keenly feel that. The BiSHOP doesn't just move, it sees. It glides diagonally. I think that's a Catholic joke. The sea, right? Anyway, I'll keep going. It glides diagonally, slicing across the board with long-range precision. No flash, no drama, just strategy and a low-key playlist of Taylor Swift deep cuts. At Keenly, we channel that same energy while others play checkers with your benefits, wildly reactive and strangely nostalgic. We're 3 moves ahead, anticipating challenges, protecting your team, and finding the angles others miss. We're not here for quick wins. We're here to shape the end game, where strategy, foresight, and a well-timed move make all the difference. So if you're tired of reactive benefits, step into the diagonal with Keenly. Like the BiSHOP, our strength lies in precision, long-range vision, and the power to shift the game when it matters most. In benefits, as in chess, the real magic happens in the end game. It's your move. Make it Keenly. End game, end game. All right, let's bring a slammer bucket. I guess it's a slammer bucket tonight. Who's coming up here? Susan? Carolyn? Susan? Susan, who was a featured storyteller. It's probably now been like 5 years, I don't know. It was a story about being mistaken for Patty Duke or something like that. Oh, Patty Hearst. Little difference there. They both wear boots, didn't they? All right, here comes a slammer, 5 minutes on the theme BiSHOP. All right, and it looks like we have one of our volunteers, actually. We've been celebrating volunteers tonight, and we are going to have a story from Heather Rideau. Come on up, Heather.
So I was kneeling on the seafoam green carpet in my childhood home in upstate New York, and the light was streaming in from the solarium in the family room, which had tons of plants that my mom tended to. It was like a nursery in our family room. And the coffee table was in front, and my father was sitting on the couch. And we were looking at a chessboard. I was maybe around 10 years old, and my dad was teaching me to play chess, explaining all the pieces and this and that. And I remember being very intrigued by the bishop, because the bishop could go as many paces forward or backward in a diagonal direction. And this became more relevant as I grew. I always had a really hard time making decisions, and my dad would say princess. That was his pet name for me, and it still is at this age. He'd say, I have a hard time with decisions, but sometimes you just have to choose to go forward, knowing you can go back, you can go another way. You just have to try. You just have to try. So when I went off to university in Montreal, I'm Canadian through my father, I was studying international development and women's studies. And in my third year, I said, what does that mean, really? So I wanted to go abroad. And my choices were, interestingly, I said, I will either go to France, because I wanted to improve my French. Really had nothing to do with international development and women's studies and the capacity of the social, economic, and political position of women in developing nations. And then the other one was Nepal, because there were big mountains there, and I wanted to go climb them. So I didn't know what to do, again, with decisions, and I remember my dad telling me with the BiSHOP, for example, a lot of it was strategic planning. You know, like you have your plan in life, and sometimes it doesn't work out, but you try. And I didn't know what my big step was, so I gathered with my roommates, and there were some other friends around, and I said, what should I do? Which way? And one of them said, just go to Nepal. I'm like, okay, decision made. So that wasn't really my strategic plan. I just let someone make it for me, and that was okay to me in that moment. So my dad and mom were a little taken back by this because of the fact that, you know, they'd done a lot of travels on motorcycle and whatnot through the country, the hippies that they were, but they weren't really worldly, and they're like, Nepal? What? And I was 21. But they said, all right, you're doing this. And they brought me to the airport at JFK. And my dad gave me a card. And I had opened the card, and it had a picture of a little girl. And she had a suitcase and some flowers in her hand, a little hat. And he had handwritten on the outside of the card, I'm off to see the world. And on the inside, my dad wrote, I don't understand why you're doing what you're doing, but I'll be there in your pocket the whole time with you. And I got on the plane, and as I saw we were coming into Kathmandu, and I'm looking around and seeing the shanty towns and the cows in the street and the open sewage, and I'm like, what am I doing? And I get out, and I get into a rickshaw, and I'm like, yeah, what am I doing? And I walked the streets of Tamil, the backpacker haven in Kathmandu. This was 25 years ago. And I remember smelling the incense from the pujas coming from the temples. And again, there's the cows wandering the streets, and I felt home. So even though I didn't have the plan, something in me took me there that it was part of my plan. I was supposed to do a volunteer program for something with international development and women's studies. And I said, nah. I was 21, I'm like, ooh. So I'm gonna go to this meditation center and jump up and down and say, hoo, 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 and try that. And I'm gonna try Reiki. And someone says, go to Thailand and learn rock climbing. And I said, I'm gonna do that. And then I saw a sign for a yoga course. And I did that for several days. And that not being part of my original plan, 25 years later, because of that course of going forward, my life has been filled with studies, work, travel, living abroad, practicing, studying, and sharing yoga. So even though I didn't know, something in me knew. Since then, my life has very much gone forwards, backwards, sideways, diagonal ways, all the ways. Not always part of the plan. But like the bishop, supposedly has this wisdom that's gained. So even when certain choices came up, unlike in a game of chess, in the game of life, you're never really starting over, right? We have that wisdom, we have things that we learn. So I always know that no matter what choice I'm making, I'm just trying, and I can go in any direction, and that my dad's there in my pocket, just rooting for his princess. So.
Thank you, Heather. That yoga is also why she can just climb straight up onto the stage without the stairs. Oh, that's the Himalaya climbing. Very good. Yeah, gosh, in college, it seemed like everybody was doing international studies. That was everyone's major when I was in college as well. I was an oddball, being in the music department, but making even, yes, there we go. But making it even stranger than that, I was a voice performance major, but I had a focus on performing pantomime. I've kind of kept up with that, actually. All right, let's move to our final featured storyteller. Please welcome back to Story Night, Alice Thompson.
The one thing my father loved more than sitting in his big green recliner and watching TV was going to church. Now, my siblings and I, we did not have the same fondness for church that he did, but each week, under duress, we would put on our Sunday best, pile into the old station wagon, and drive to Calvary Baptist Church in San Diego, where my father was a deacon. As soon as we got there, I would rush off to find my seat, which was usually up in the balcony because I could see everything, but my father couldn't see me. And I would watch him because he would take his place in front of the church in the special chairs chosen for the elders. And he would sit there and sit up straighter, his shoulders reared back, and he would look slowly around the room. My father knew that's where he needed to be. He was a man to be respected, a leader. Then the choir would start singing, and after a few songs, the pastor would make his way up to the pulpit. He was a bit of a superstar in that church because he had marched with Dr. Martin Luther King, but his sermons were a lot less inspiring. They consisted of a lot of amens and a bunch of yes, Jesus, but had very little in the way of actual preaching. And then after the sermon, he would make his way down to the sycophants and the hangers-on who just wanted a piece of him, who wanted to orbit around him just so he could look at them and say hello. He loved it. He ate it up. And then they would follow him out to his gold Cadillac, which he parked out front. He would put on his sunglasses, flash that phony smile, say a few vapid words of encouragement, and then he was in his car and he was gone. Yes, ladies and gentlemen, that was my pastor. And as it is in a lot of African American churches, the bishop, that person who's supposed to oversee and shepherd their congregation. But we didn't have that kind of bishop at Calvary. This man was only interested in overseeing his own finances. And it wasn't just a bishop that I lacked. I didn't really have much of a father either. With all of his talk about Christianity and Jesus this and God that, my father was a deceptively cruel person who hid his nastiness behind a smile or a wink. He would say awful things to us, in particular to my mother, and then he would say, "I'm just joking." Ha ha. But these critiques were strategic. They weren't meant to just hurt us. They were meant to break us, to grind us down until we had no fight left. And my father did this because he was a tyrant who wielded power from his green recliner chair and ruled his kingdom by fiat. Now, I don't really talk much about my father, and it's not simply because of his cruelty. It's partly because I didn't really know this man at all. He was what Churchill would have called a riddle wrapped in a mystery inside an enigma. I knew very little about my father's past, and he gave very few details about his life before he met my mother. Once when I was about 8 or 9 years old, this man came to our door asking for my father. I had never seen him before. And when my father got to the door, he said, "What you doing here?" I thought that was kind of odd. He ended up inviting the man inside, but he never introduced him to us by name. This stranger seemed nice enough. He spoke to me and my siblings and my mother, but he sensed that my father did not want him around. So after a few moments, he made his excuses and said his goodbyes. My father walked him out. They spoke briefly, and the man left. I never saw him again. And when my father came back inside, he just plopped down on his chair and started watching TV again. He didn't feel the need to explain to us who this man was, and we knew better than to ask. Because my father believed he did not have to explain anything to anyone in his house, my mother included. He believed children should be seen but not heard, and that wives must submit to their husbands, so saith the Lord. Hallelujah. But my father was the kind of man who wasn't interested in the minutia of parenthood, the parent-teacher meetings, the doctor's appointments, the sicknesses that befell each child at some point or another. So this left the bulk of the child rearing to my mother. My father only got involved when corporal punishment was necessary. And this he seemed to take a perverse pleasure in, dramatically removing his belt from his pants before spanking us. Or if we did something that he found particularly egregious, we would have to go out into the backyard to the big tree and pull off a switch that he would then use to spank us with. He was a man who believed that in the traditional roles of men and women. So that meant that I was supposed to be in the house with my mother and sisters, cooking and cleaning, while he and my brothers did the manly work outside. But I hated that. I was always outside with my brothers, either playing with them or my friends, and my father disliked that very much. He disliked that I was always outside with my brothers. He disliked the fact that I always wore pants. He disliked the fact that I did not act the way he thought a young girl should act. And my sisters, who were much older, they had already begun disregarding Dad's ancient advice, so I was his last opportunity to raise a young woman the right way. So he would often he would often tell me I was going to come to the grocery store with him, and this way he could impart his wisdom nuggets to me on our way there. And he would say things like, "You know, a woman can't take care of herself, so you need to learn how to cook, or no man is going to want you." And I was like 11 or 12, and I said, "Dad, I'm not getting married." And that weekend, he woke me up early to cook his breakfast. Now, my father was the best cook in the house, even better than my mother, but he said he did it so that he could teach me how to be a good wife. But it didn't last long because he had to actually eat what it was that I cooked. Most of the time when my dad was home, he was sitting in that green recliner watching TV. And the only time I remember the TV ever being off was when we went to bed, or during these times where he felt like somehow the kids had disappointed him in some way. He never bothered to explain to us what it was, but we knew he was upset because he had his Bible in his hand and he was going to turn the TV off. And he would go into preacher mode, reading to us from the Old Testament so we would know what God would do if we continue to be disobedient and sinful. And the only thing those fire and brimstone sermons did was alienate us, was push us away. And my father either didn't realize that or he didn't care, and I'm not sure which it was. But in the end, he did end up losing us, little by little, one by one. And as we got older, my father was beginning to see that he was losing control of his kingdom. And we were starting to see these tiny cracks in his carefully crafted veneer. Like one Sunday, he was so frustrated with us that he said, "I'm so sick and tired of y'all's whining and complaining. If you don't want to go to church, then don't go." And each of his 6 kids said, "Fine, Dad, we are not going to go to church anymore." Now, my father would have appreciated us to continue to go to church. He wanted us to continue to go, but he would never admit that to us because admitting it would be a sign of weakness. And men didn't show weakness, in particular to their children. So he convinced himself it was his idea that we not go anymore. He said, "I don't want to go with y'all no more anyway because I'm sick and tired of y'all fussing and whining." And it was around this time that my mother began to come into her own. She was breaking away from my father's control. She had gone back to school. She got a job. She learned to drive. She had to go to a driving school because my father refused to teach her. And my dad started to see my mother thriving in ways she never did before. And he also started to see that she didn't need him. Maybe none of us did. So, my dad was just the kind of person who would never admit that. He would never admit that my mom was doing something that he didn't want her to do, but that she could do, you know? He was this person who was so closed off from us that we just could never wrap our arms around him. Eventually, my dad he went from this man who was this dictatorial parent and simply became the man who sat in the chair at home in front of the TV, in the chair at church, and in the chair on the back patio where he would sit for hours organizing his fishing equipment while he listened to the baseball on the radio. And there's this picture of him in one of my mom's old photo albums of him sitting in that very spot on the patio. It's like a late summer evening, and my father's wearing his straw hat. He always wore a hat. His wire-rimmed glasses. He's got on a khaki shirt and matching khaki pants. And he's resting his elbows on his knees. I don't know who took the picture, but he isn't looking at the camera. He's just staring out into the backyard. And I always wondered, what is he thinking about then? What's on his mind? And sometimes I look at that picture and I can forget the father he actually was. It was hard to love a man like my father, and in all honesty, I'm not sure that I did. But I didn't hate him either. Truth is, I didn't feel anything for him, and I think that's even worse. I don't know what my father went through in his life that prevented him from showing us even a shred of parental love and understanding, but that was his choice. And because of it, he just became part of the decor. The chair I said goodbye to on my way to school or to a friend's house. And that's the image of him I remember the most, the one that's ingrained in my mind, of Dad sitting in that green recliner, his tarnished throne, his face never leaving the TV set, as our lives just moved on around him. Thank you.
Thank you, Alice. Did you know that the Pope's chair is called the cathedra? I did not know that. Yeah, neither did I. And that's why we call it a cathedral, because of the name of the Pope's chair. Some of you look really blown away by that. Some of you look like you're ready for something else to come next. So let's have the slammer bucket again. Let's do that. And I'll use my mime skills here to... Oh. Oh, the last part is the hardest. All right. This is a person who is standing up for the very beginning, a show at the Linen Building. So she's got a long history with Story Night. Please welcome back to the stage, Molly Mettler.
So, like Jodi, I was a choir kid. And Jodi, I'll sing the Kyrie liaison with you any old day. And this is a story about a real bishop by the name of Wilburn C. Campbell, the bishop of the Diocese of West Virginia. I met him in Peterkin Church Camp, where I went every summer to choir camp from the age of 10 to the age of 17. And we'd show up at Peterkin, which was in the Appalachian Mountains in Romney, West Virginia, and drive up a long shaded driveway to a big house, which was the main house for the church camp. And all the campers lived in World War II Quonset huts. But there was a nice little mid-century modern house perched on the side of the driveway. And my first summer there, I said, who lives there? Because I'm in a Quonset hut, and whoever gets that is pretty special. And I was told, oh, that's the bishop's house. The bishop. The director of the camp, Mary Jo Fitz, was a scary woman. At age 10, she and I were eye to eye. And she had white hair and wrinkles and black cat's eye glasses. And this is the 60s, so she smoked. And then she'd blow it up over your face. And she didn't like kids. And she didn't like noise. She didn't like chaos. She didn't like anything about church camp except her absolute control over it. But what I heard about Bishop Campbell was that he was the not Mary Jo Fitz, that there was something magical about Bishop Campbell. And if we were going to be lucky that summer, Bishop Campbell would come to choir camp. Now, there was boys and girls camp, there was junior high camp, there was senior high camp, and he'd make one appearance throughout the summer, and you always hoped it would be to your camp. And I had been at Peterkin for a couple of years before I heard that the bishop was coming. I was excited. He pulled up in a sports car with his basset hound, Absalom. He had on, in the Episcopal Church, bishops wear a purple shirt and a white dog collar, as they call it. He had on that and a pair of white shorts, white athletic socks, and white sneakers, and Absalom. And he was the anti-Mary Jo Fitz. He was so friendly and so affable and so embracing. All the kids just loved him. And he'd come and hang out with us for a couple of days up there at Peterkin. Well, at the end of every camp, there was a softball game. And I'll never forget this. Now, Peterkin, the choir camp, was made up of kids of all ages, and the softball game had to be mixed teams, boys and girls, little kids and big kids. And I was playing that year. You kind of get voluntold that you're going to play at this game. And the rumor went up that says, gee, I hope Bishop Campbell is going to come to the game. Bishop Campbell. Whoa, you should see him. And we went to the game. I was up at bat. I struck out. And I was followed by Bishop Campbell. And the whole camp started shouting, Bishop, Bishop, Bishop. And I watched as this man, and he was still wearing the white shorts and the purple shirt and the dog collar. He got up at the plate, and he held his bat like that. And he took a pitch and hit it into the ball into the swimming pool. It was clear across the athletic field. It was just amazing what he was able to do. And that's when I learned that Bishop Campbell used to be a Major League Baseball player before he found God.
Thank you for listening. If you'd like to see the storytellers in addition to hearing them, this entire show is available on the Story Night YouTube channel. Support this podcast by texting StoryPod to 44321. As this was our 15th birthday show, perhaps you can give $15 to celebrate 15 years. Story Night is funded in part by the Idaho Commission on the Arts and the National Endowment for the Arts. We also receive funding from the Boise City Department of Arts and History. Thank you to our media sponsors, Radio Boise and Boise State Public Radio, plus our season sponsor, Keenly. Podcast production is by Stephen Baldessari. Our theme song was composed by Dan Costello, with guest musicians from Sangha Taiko drumming. You can rate and review this show on Apple Podcasts. Please subscribe to Story Night wherever you download your podcast. Have a story? Call the Storyline at 208-917-1970 and leave a message, or click the Storytellers tab on our website. Find out how to participate in our live show at storynight.org or visit us on Instagram or Facebook. I'm Jodi Eichelberger. Thanks for being a part of our story.